So you're telling me med school was your fallback?
Med school might have been the fallback, yeah. That could rub some docs the wrong way.
Oh, I'm kidding.
So I was very lucky to go to Cleveland. Great experience. Abu Dhabi is roughly 85% expats, 15% nationals.
I didn't know it was that heavy. That's wild. What the hell do consultants do? What do you do?
We do a lot of PowerPoints on planes.
Right.
Take your watch and tell you what time it is. No, we're just an asset for leadership. Keep it simplistic, realistic, and relatable.
Yeah, don't take it personal. Be resilient, be patient. Those are words to live by. Good afternoon, everyone. Spencer Jones here, founder of Exo Medtech and host of the Exo Medtech Innovation Podcast. With us today, I have someone I am happy to call a friend. We actually went to high school together, believe it or not. So Stewart Clark is a healthcare consultant. He has a crazy background in health system strategy and finance. He spent the majority of his time in kind of three areas: enterprise and service line strategy, acquisitions and ventures, and academic medical center and physician group practice consulting. Like, if you have never met Stewart, if you've never heard of him, you need to go check his LinkedIn. He's got an incredibly awesome and storied kind of background. And we were in high school together and went our separate ways. And then the way we reconnected, it was just funny because we kind of went our own separate ways, but both in the health system and venture and stuff arena. But Stewart, thank you for coming on the pod. Where do we find you today?
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Based out of Cleveland, travel around the country, really focused on those areas that you just described, but hanging out upstairs today. So if you hear some little ones screaming in the background, don't mind that, but really happy to be here.
Yeah, so what I was referencing for the audience, they're what was he talking about? So I remember I was doing the Linnaeus Medical thing and I was on LinkedIn and all of a sudden I saw Stewart's profile pop up and it was Cleveland Clinic. I was oh, that's cool. And then I was executive administrative fellowship. And then I saw you were in Abu Dhabi and I was what the hell? What's going on? And then I looked up that facility and it looks amazing. So why don't you tell the audience, what is that program? Why were you in Abu Dhabi? What were you doing there?
Yeah, I think my parents had the same reaction when I told them I was over there. What is that? But no, the administrative fellowship program, I was very blessed and lucky coming out of UAMS where I got my graduate degree. The intention was to go on to medical school, actually. I had taken the MCAT, was ready to go, and decided that I would apply to these highly competitive programs. So it's kind of like a medical residency coming out of medical school where acceptance rates super low. They used to call me the diversity hire coming from Arkansas.
Nice.
But, so you're competing with some really interesting folks, but just applied to the top 5 to see if I could get in. If I didn't get into those, it was on to med school. It was very blessed to go to what I think is the best program for administrative fellowships.
So you're telling me med school was your fallback?
Med school might have been the fallback. Yeah, it's always the goal to be a consultant. So that could rub some docs the wrong way.
Oh, I'm kidding.
So I was very lucky to go to Cleveland. Great experience. It's a 1-year project-based rotational fellowship where you're essentially given a slate of projects that you wouldn't really have access to again for a long time in your career. So you're given great exposure to senior leadership. You get great mentors. I worked on everything from acquiring a facility in the Middle East to the construction and design of a new health education campus, which is Cleveland Clinic's medical school. So great experience. And that's what led me to Abu Dhabi, which I'm happy to elaborate on a little bit more. But
yeah, I definitely want you to. But for the people listening, seriously, if you haven't ever seen a picture of the facility, just Google Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi. It is a world-class facility. I mean, you can describe it better, Stuart. Tell people what it's like.
Yeah, it was a pretty surreal place. So it's built on a man-made island. So if you look at the time-lapse footage of it on YouTube, if you're able to find that, it starts with just a empty body of water. Then they built a man-made island, and then it is a exquisite and gorgeous facility that's actually expanded even more since I left. They added a state-of-the-art cancer facility as well. So it was built by Dell Architects. It's actually, I think that's correct, there's a carbon copy of it in Dallas. Actually, it's the Dell facility in Dallas, sorry.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Of Cleveland Abu Dhabi. It's just on a bit of a smaller scale, but it is a absolutely gorgeous building. And just to give you a context of the beautification there, it's made out of majority glass. And because of the stress on the glass panes, they just accept that every 6 months, a glass pane will break and they have to replace it. But they're willing to eat that because it is a absolutely gorgeous view of the Corniche and the water, and healthcare culture over there is a little bit different. So you have folks that stay in the hospital with their extended families until they are themselves deemed as completely well. And that cannot be medically well. That can be they're feeling well. So you have length of stay.
Wow.
of over 100 days. So it's a mix of a 5-star resort and a hospital all in one. The administration of the clinic would not want me to say it's a 5-star resort, but that is how folks treated it in the early days. So it's a beautiful...
Wow, that's crazy. Well, so that kind of ties into the next part. Like, part of what you were doing over there was like, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but like, kind of emerging market healthcare M&A, so would love to just like kind of in a little bit more detail, like what were you really doing? What does that mean, right? Because I think that's very abstract to a lot of people. And then the other bend there is like kind of what you're mentioning, those cultural differences in how healthcare is viewed, perceived, delivered, paid for, all of that, like anything you could speak on with that as well.
Absolutely. So I'll just start off with very quickly the things that I was focused on. So M&A was absolutely a component, although the folks that own Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi is a quasi-government entity called Mubadala, which is really a network of healthcare assets. And Cleveland Clinic was their flagship asset, but they had multiple other locations and services, and we're always on the lookout for new locations and services to add. So that was the M&A piece. But primarily my role there was in service line planning and execution. So starting up things like comprehensive stroke programs or other clinical service lines just getting going. I was there in its first 5 years. So it's really the pains of starting and running a new hospital and the business development aspects that are associated with that. So lots of work docs to stand up what those service lines look like, project volumes, business planning for them, prioritizing rollout, all that good stuff. So that was the majority of my time, but also when there was an interesting acquisition target, you would do the business case planning and investor case to roll up to Mubadala. So that was really the core areas that I focused on. Worked with some really great people, really loved the culture. The system there is really interesting. So it's largely fee for service. They are moving to a more capitated model. It's really in line with Western healthcare for the most part, although I will say the exception to that is for national folks. There is a national insurance program that's platinum insurance for folks that are Emirati or born and raised in the UAE. Patient base, when I was there, I'm sure this is expanding now, is towards those folks, but that's expanding. Abu Dhabi is roughly 85% expats, 15% nationals. So
I didn't know it was that heavy. That's wild.
Yeah, it's very heavy. It's the same way in Dubai, probably 90-10 in Dubai. And again, these are 2017 numbers, so it may have gotten worse since then. It is the overwhelming majority of the population is foreign national. So two different systems for healthcare is...
That's really interesting. You kind of mentioned something, and I think like in the world that you traffic in, it is like the currency, it's normal language, but like if you're wanting to understand how hospitals think, if you're a medtech innovator and trying to sell to them, like just look up kind of service line strategy, like coordinating multidisciplinary, healthcare services across the continuum to achieve goals or service specific patient population or target population. Like innovators really like view things through the eyes of the hospital administrators and the CFOs and the people that are planning all of that stuff. Like anything on that, like if you're put yourself, what should medtech innovators know about like how they think about service line mix and all of that stuff?
Medtech innovators trying to break in to work with some of these larger providers. And I can speak on Middle Eastern sensitivities specifically when it comes to trying to work into that market. But more broadly, as folks are trying to work with some of these big folks, like if you were trying to get Linnaeus into Cleveland Clinic or Mayo, the first thing I would say is accept that time moves a lot slower for these folks, and that no matter how sexy your solution or how great the problem you're solving, it will still move slowly. And you accept that, and is going in, if you don't and you expect them to move on your timelines, you will feel frustrated and challenged and like you're failing or you're not. So I would say just be patient, recognize that these are Titanic-sized organizations and breaking into them can be exceptionally difficult, and finding the right avenue and connection is crucial, and not making their lives difficult unnecessarily. So don't ask for an NDA straight out, and don't do other things that can turn folks off to working with you. Just be as open as possible and recognize that their timelines are going to be very different than yours.
Yeah, we're not like anti-NDA by any stretch, but like I feel like there's very specific places and cases where you need to use them, and like it's rarely before the first meeting. I see a lot of people. I mean, I think I went in on this on another podcast where I was like, stop asking people to sign NDAs to talk about your thing. Like if they need to see like prints or CAD drawings or like your full Monty deck, like maybe, sure, like get the NDA in place. But I think the big academic medical center, and I know we're going to peel the onion back on this a little bit more too, but like I think about it almost in the same way as I think about venture capital. Like 1% of companies get venture capital funding. I think it's less than 1%, actually. That's all companies. I think if you took Medtech or whatever specifically, I'm sure it's more. But like the point there is, I would bet there's probably a similar number around like what percent work with like top 10 academic medical centers, like what percent of medtech companies sell to them, right? Like sometimes it's not for you. Like if you have a first of its kind or best in class new type of, ablation catheter or electrophysiology or neuromodulation thing, there is an advancement of science that is so significant that you're going to get them to play ball, and it'll still take time. But I guess the point here is a lot of companies, like you can still focus on other accounts and that maybe there's high volume or surgeons that are high volume and like not place all your bets and resources and time and energy in that big academic medical center coming on board and then you leveraging that to get some investment or deal or other accounts, because like you said, it just takes a ton of time. They have to say no to a lot of people because a lot of people are asking them to use their stuff. So like don't put all your eggs in that basket, especially if you are, maybe just a kind of a classic 510K and you're not really frame breaking on anything with your innovation. I don't know if you'd agree or disagree. I'm not telling people not to reach out to them, but like there's a lot of time that can be wasted. You know what I mean?
I definitely agree. I think there can be significant time wasted. And I've actually been on the side of that, wasting people's time. And that's, not a comfortable position to be in because you can be the individual over, like, for example, for a provider in the UK, I was over all innovations and venture activity, right? So if we were going to invest or, partner with a group or a product, that the buck stopped with me there, right? But even I had one group that I was very excited to work with in the genetic space. And despite the buck stopping with me, I still have to go through 5 or 6 different committees to talk about that investment, what it means for us and how it works, and something that, I can't on paper pull the trigger on in reality was 8 months down the road, and I'm still telling them I'm sorry that we have to wait. Yeah. So you just have to be realistic about those timelines. And again, if you're anchoring it to your business case, it's like the launching point, a great working relationship that predates the product with that organization, it can be very hard to rely there. So I would advise folks to use larger AMCs and organizations as key accounts for when you're established, but to make them a part of your initial business planning going in cold because you think you have a great idea. Even if it is a great idea, it could not materialize in your timelines.
Yeah. Before we hop off kind of like the academic medical center piece, I don't know if you have strong feelings about this one or the other, but like there's a lot of health systems that are realizing they need to do a better job of innovating and having kind of like an innovation stream that they can put people in. And I think part of the reason they're seeing that is because they see Cleveland Clinic and like the licensing and royalty revenue that they're getting. And it's just like amazing. And I know there are also other groups, and I want to say it's Cedar Sinai or could be wrong, but they have like a fundamental, like they like don't take any like equity or license. Like they have a kind of an inverse of that model where it's like, hey, like we're going to really, really support you, but we're going to get, license royalty. It's like pretty stiff, but we're going to support it. We're going to put resources around you. There's a little bit of opposite of like, we're going to put resources around you, but like, we're not going to take anything. So it's trying to like, where do you fall on that? Like, I think you may be partial to Cleveland Clinic's model. Like I personally think it's probably better as well. What are your thoughts? Like, what do you think the models that work look like? And, where are you seeing health system innovation going in the coming years?
That's a great question. I really love the internal model where you have something like a Cleveland Clinic that has a dedicated innovations department that if, folks at Cleveland, like best heart surgeons in the world, invent a new device or procedure, they go to the innovations team to help them to make that something real, or inversely, that same team, it would then be looking at outside organizations to invest in and partner with, right? So it can happen ways. And I think that internalizing that type of venture mentality, and a lot of those folks that are in those roles in systems like the clinic are from a venture background and have contacts in those areas. So there's more and more health systems that are adopting that mentality, and it's great to see innovation being pushed in that direction. A lot of organizations are economically challenged and can't afford that luxury occasionally, but there can be significant benefits on the back end when you're able to create a sustainable model in that way. And revenue can be multiple ways, equity stakes, royalties. Structuring deals in AMC is no different than structuring deals when you're working in a venture or anywhere else. But it's great to see them bringing it in-house to really drive innovation from the forefront of the folks that are actually providing and delivering medicine. So I think that's a good thing. I think you'll see that. I also think that you'll see a much heavier influence of private equity and venture funds in healthcare in the future. And I think that can, drive innovation and be a great thing, or I think it can impact clinical care in a negative way by reinforcing short-term decision making. So I think that there's going to be more and more outside money coming in. Healthcare continues to struggle post-COVID. Folks have really struggled to bounce back, and that impacts how they can invest innovations. And some folks do it great, like Cleveland and some of the larger folks. And then some folks are really struggling to get over that hump and really just survive and provide care for folks. folks.
Yeah, I know we've got a new regime change, new administration in the office, the turnover, a lot of kind of officials and appointments and all of those things. It felt like there was a lot of scrutiny coming down on a lot of the physician roll-ups, kind of medical practice groups, I'll say broadly, right? And I feel like that's going to kind of stop. Like there's not really going to be much scrutiny on that anymore. I'm curious, like, is there any tea leaves you're seeing kind of in the world that you traffic in, consulting on some of these matters, right? Like how are you guys reading the current events and the new administration with respect to that kind of like transaction and roll-up scrutiny?
So we have our government and policy folks that give us the lectures on these on a pretty regular basis. So it's save the expertise for that group on speculation on how things will change medical realm. But I would say that, with the rolling out regulations that like increase limits on market size, so saying that you can't acquire something if you have greater than 30% market share in the area, and other challenging regulations that were coming in at the tail end of the Biden administration and that we've been dealing with dealing with the looming effects over the potential looming effects in the coming months and years is a bit, I think, for healthcare, because the way that healthcare works, it's pretty rare for your big provider on the hill to not have 30% market share. So that really limits what you can do, especially in high populated areas. It makes New York and California very difficult. There's also other M&A regulations coming in, like, the time and what you have to report. It has changed significantly. So We'll see if any of those provisions get rolled back, or this administration's FTC has. But we'll see there. But it's only becoming harder in a time where healthcare operators are really struggling, and consolidation may be their only way out. So that's where we try to help guide folks through. And we're seeing more and more folks that when we're consulting that are really struggling financially to recover post-COVID, and they're looking to explore larger partnerships that, could be potentially blocked by some of these more challenging regulations, which I don't think is the intent of the regulations.
No, yeah. It feels like doing kind of like meat cleaver style, or 30% is the rule or whatever. Like you said, like New York, it's like you have, like, if you're covering Manhattan or whatever, it feels like it's almost kind of like you're treating the symptom but not the root cause. And it's like, or like kind of like you're trying to kind of regulate the wrong thing, because it's more about consumer protection than it is about like any specific number for market share, right? So it's like, if we can, I don't know, it just seems like it's regulating the wrong thing. I get what they're trying to do.
You run into the rock and the hard place of, okay, you want to protect consumers from monopolistic behavior within the healthcare industry. I completely understand. But if the options are buy, consolidate, and save the organization versus organization fails and that patient population doesn't get care, I think the lesser of the two evils is to accept consolidation. And that's what more and more folks across the country are running into, and especially in like rural community hospitals, that's where this problem is going to be most significant. So it's a real challenge that we're butting up against, and we're trying to help folks navigate through that decision-making process.
Yeah, absolutely. So on we talked a little bit about the provider M&A piece. Anything additional on, provider M&A consolidation trends, anything on that front, or anything that's kind of just like related to those topics that's just like a burning frustration of yours?
Well, we talked about one of the burning frustrations, where I think that the folks that, consolidation is typically forced by financial hardship, and that's coming out of post-COVID recovery, where you had the, healthcare model get up. I mean, I don't think that everyone may appreciate this, or the audience may fully appreciate this, is that healthcare organizations largely, make their money on elective and surgical procedures, and then medical procedures are loss leaders. As a general concept, there's obviously exceptions to that on a service line by service line basis, but, seeing someone for COVID doesn't make money, and that's why there's all this flood of support coming in. So because you lost all your elective procedures. So, recovering from that. So you turned off the tap, and then the tap just doesn't turn back on fully. And some folks are really feeling that. And if you're not able to recover appropriately, and you have regulations that prevent you from partnering with larger organizations that have the scale, intent, and influence to really ensure care to that same population, that is a huge frustration of mine, because you see this happening where folks are trying to say, okay, how are we going to make this work going forward? And, there's folks in our home state that are in that situation. And if you think about some of the poorest areas, it's either merge or close. And so that's my biggest frustration in the industry is the recognition of that fact, and feeling a bit helpless, and on some occasions, when you're bound by regulations. And that's a huge frustration. I would say some other takes on consolidation. Again, you're seeing folks like private equity come into the frame here, where you have folks that are former provider, coming out of provider organizations, General Catalyst and other folks that are really picking up and saying that they want to buy a lot of health systems. You have Risant Group that's trying to buy lots of health systems and really consolidate them to something that's at scale and effectual. So I think that consolidation is a trend that's here to stay. Money dried up post-COVID. The acquisitions market was at a lull. Now it's coming back in full force. So I would expect to see a lot of acquisition and or M&A activity more broadly, and lots of outside and non-traditional money funneling into healthcare in new and creative ways. It's not just dental practices and anesthesia groups anymore. It's your large-scale flagship hospitals.
Yeah, absolutely. There was so many nuggets in there. I think one of the ones, if I'm listening to this as a Medtech innovator, like just making sure you understand that where the hospital makes money is on those elective procedures and in the OR suite, basically. And then everything else is a loss, right? It's a loss leader. And, you're like, but my device, it makes life easier for nurses and it's better for patients and everybody likes it. It's like, no one cares because you're making a losing part of their business more expensive. That's all you're doing, right? If you're not driving an outcome, truly preventing something expensive, an expensive episodic care element that's like, actually matters. So I feel like people just like, and that's why honestly moving from, previous company over into the surgical space, like kind of where I am now, it's just kind of a paradigm shift trying to sell into a part of the hospital that makes money versus like the part of the hospital that loses money, right? It's just,
I'd give health systems a slight benefit of the doubt that if something did dramatically increase quality and safety and patient experience, that they would further the loss leading area, that they would adopt it. But it is a challenge. Then you're climbing an already uphill battle even more. It's an uphill battle to get a product into a profitable service. It's an even steeper up battle to get it into a loss leading service if it's a new innovation. So
yeah, I say that tongue in cheek. I mean, they're not running a prison on the other side that's not the OR of the hospital. Like they have to keep it nice and they do want nice things and they do want to advance care. But like, I've seen some things recently and I feel like I keep seeing these. This one I feel like can like break through. It's called Safe BVM, but it's basically a bag valve mask, right? And if you've ever, done healthcare, you've seen, you're giving someone oxygen. Very common problem is like they'll do it too fast or too deep, right? And it's every patient and their lung size is different and everything. So they may do it too fast and too deep and it'll get air in kind of just like this glottal space, or it'll force it into the stomach, right? Or they'll hyperventilate them, which, consistent hyperventilation, you change your ABGs, your blood gases, and there's bad effects there. So they've made this little adapter that goes between the bag and the mask, and it like restricts after you can't go above 50 liters a minute. It's like, great. The entire Ambu bag, which it's like a very consolidated market in that sense, but the entire Ambu bag is like $8 and they're selling theirs for, I think it was like 20 or 25. So it's like their like connector, the piece that goes in between is like 2 or 3 times as much as like the thing that but it's kind of that like, this is clearly better. This mousetrap works. It's just selling into a commoditized space, but everyone agrees that it's good and we need it. But it's just like, our budget was this, it's just one of those weird things where a lot of that direct patient care landscape is very commoditized. And when stuff comes new to the market, it's hard to sell it at a price that makes sense on the stuff around it,
What I would advise innovators to do in that case then is not to frame it. Adapter is $25 on the bag, it's $8. I would work with someone like myself or other folks that really understand how hospitals are thinking and working, and I would look to quantify the negative output of all of the acute issues that you were describing as a result of not having the device, right? So if you could say that someone had a negative outcome that was worth $1 million and your device is preventing that, that's how I would frame the value case, and that's how you get into these organizations and really create some momentum.
I met the CEO of that company out at JPM. He's like rock star talented. We'll like tag him in the show notes or something, but they're doing just that. They had kind of their initial study that they did to kind of prove out the kind of the flow efficacy, if you will. And now they're doing that kind of like, quantitative economic outcome study. So you're thinking about it the way he was as well. Okay. So I'm going to rib you here for a second, and I can do this because I've done the consulting thing as well, but I know you've been in the consulting world for a while. What the hell do consultants do? What do you do?
We do a lot of PowerPoints on planes and, take your watch and tell you what time it is. No, we're just an asset for leadership, temporary asset where folks don't have the bandwidth or the expertise to solve a complex problem that they're experiencing.
Let's dive into that a little bit more. And just not like your day in the life, but maybe kind of a micro project just to give the audience a kind of a picture of kind of some of the expertise that you bring.
Yeah, so we'll do just a quick, easy one related to academic medical centers. there. So let's say that you want to understand what all of your docs are doing, or any of your folks are doing in a given time. So how much time do they spend in the clinic? How much time do they spend on research? And that really matters for large AMCs because they cross-subsidize their missions, right? No one's making money on research and education, so the clinical enterprise has to subsidize it. So it really matters where folks are slotting into their time. And health systems are really challenged about tracking that and understanding how they do spend their time. So on a focused engagement, we would come in where we've done this with multiple providers across the country with standardized ways to allocate effort, working with existing systems, working with their leadership to be the thought partner and draft all the materials to categorize that effort in appropriate places. And at the end, we'd leave them a report to say, this is what all your people are doing, and this is where they're spending their time, and this is how you update this moving forward. Now, that is something that would get done 1,000 different ways if you asked each individual department to do it themselves. So we come in, standardized approach, centralized resource, but you don't want to hire someone where their only job is to look at faculty effort. You want to bring in someone who does this all the time, who can do a very fast process to get you where you need to be. So that's just one example, and if you want to shift to the M&A world, we would come in. If you were considering a partnership, we would help guide you on that strategic decision. What are the core things that you need to be looking at and thinking about? So looking at your operational trends, looking at your competitive landscape, and then, really supporting folks and understanding, should I partner, should I not partner? And then looking to say, okay, what does that partnership look like for me? So everything from the strategic decision making process all the way down through structuring and governance of what a new partnership or deal could look like.
That's really interesting. I mean, it seems like there is like real tangible and legitimate value into kind of having, I'm almost viewing like you have your organization in your org chart, and there's this kind of like API that can like plug in and see all the different kind of levels and depth to it and how they're working, how they're spending their time, like you said on that initial example. But then also like being able to say like, and here's benchmarks for other organizations and other academic centers, and here's an example of what we did to improve this, and moving RVUs around and all of that stuff. Like, because I think like they could get that data internally themselves, but then do they know what to do with it? Do they know what their peers are doing? Right? I feel like that's a piece of it.
Absolutely. Well, that's the majority focus here, and the really the value proposition is we've done this in 20 other places. This is how they we can, even if you're looking in the M&A space, we've analyzed market conditions across the country and can try to do similar comparisons and how those worked out for them. The breadth of doing this, and oftentimes it sounds, I know AI is the sexy buzzword of the century here, which has great applications, and I'm not underselling AI, but when you're talking about something like effort or any of these more complex processes, I mean, some folks are still working off of spreadsheets, which is it works for you, but it's trying to get that process in a standardized manner that you can again compare to your peers. But those peer comparisons, and once you do, there's a lot to be said for repetition and focus and expertise. And where an acquisition may be a once in a decade event for a health system, managing those strategic decisions across multiple clients, and that's your day job, then those advice and direction can become invaluable. And that's really bread and butter is leveraging your work across multiple clients in multiple areas to help guide folks into the right decision that may feel overwhelming for them.
Yeah, that's very well put. Sounds like you've explained this before, the value of it, right? Like, I'm sold, man. Can I hire you guys?
Yeah, but I do love all the consultant memes that are just
they're so good.
Constant McKinsey comparisons, and folks asking me if I have ever like toppled a government before, or whatever else makes it into the news. But yeah, no, not that. It's not that kind of. Not that.
It's like, how'd your day go, honey? We told them to increase revenue and cut expenses. Or
the airplane alligator ones is my favorite, when you're just constantly typing.
Oh yeah,
those things. Yeah.
All right. So on that point, important question: are you aisle seat or are you window seat?
Window always.
Oh really? See, I'm aisle. I'm like, I don't like being like pinned in. I drink water for whatever reason. Airports, like I have to pee all the time because I don't know. I feel dehydrated. What's the thought process on the window?
I break the consultant trend. I typically do not work on planes unless I have to, and it's head support. Man, I'm a narcoleptic. I like the consistent head support window, and I'm never going to the bathroom on a plane. That doesn't happen. So
that's crazy. Morning flights, I'm with you on the window. Like the head, being able to like head support there is great. But like I hate working on a plane as well. Like you have to do it sometimes. When you got to do it, you got to do it. I would literally just rather like whatever the travel day is, just like get up an hour or two earlier and work. Like if it's because I feel like I'm working at like in second gear the whole time. It's just like like this is painful. I'm also like way too like dependent on like my full keyboard with the 10 key and the mouse and the two screens, because like I'm working on a laptop. I feel like I'm like on my phone or something.
I agree. I live my life in Excel, and most things I think in Excel, and Excel on a laptop is annoying, to say the least. So,
yeah. Are you like hotkey wizard? Like, are you flying around without even touching the mouse and like?
I worked in the UK and was more heavy on the M&A investment banking side of things. They would come around with scissors and cut the cord on your mouse. So you are
No way.
not allowed to use it. So yeah, a hotkey person. I'm getting lazier nowadays because my job doesn't require it as much. But
that's so ridiculous. That's intense. I love it though. So you mentioned AI. Like, we wouldn't be a real podcast if we didn't bring up AI at some point. But they've heard me talk about the tools that I like and use, and it's kind of like an ever-growing, constantly evolving and expanding list. But like my staples are like Claude. I'm kind of like Team Claude over ChatGPT. Nowadays, it seems like I need to be looking at DeepSeek, but love Claude. We love Bolt. We love Lindy. It's a great one, like agent-driven stuff. What are you using it? We'll go personal first, and then I'm curious, like, what, your organization's doing. But personally, are you using any AI tools or workflows that you would, want to share with people?
I consult, and going back to what we do all day, we live our lives in meetings. So Copilot is valuable and saves our teams a lot of time in terms of summarizing. But we actually have to be really careful with the use of AI professionally, but just sticking with personally for a sec. I mean, personal life, I also like Claude. I use ChatGPT as well, menial personal tasks. But, when it comes to the professional side, consultants shouldn't rely on AI to answer core questions. I will answer the question myself and then go through our pretty extensive sources database that we have access to as part of our firm, that any consulting firm pay for play resources that are valuable that, AIs won't have exposure to sometimes. Yeah. But I will then run the question through AI to see if I missed anything. And if I think AI grabbed something that I didn't consider, I will go and then dive deep into the source that, I would never use a closed sourced AI model, because then I have to scratch the level deeper to say, if AI told me this, I have to now go and look at the individual source and read it and consider it. So it makes our job easier in terms of checking, but we really try hard not to rely on it primary work. But
of course, yeah.
But I will say that we have a whole digital health team that's forgotten more about digital health than I'll ever know, that are really industry leaders in AI adoption and consulting. So I largely defer folks to that if you want to go and check out Chartis's digital health platform and how that AI is working its way through those.
Yeah, honestly, I'm gonna go do that. Like Cooley Go. I don't know, like law firm Cooley. They have like a docs. It's called Cooley Go, and it's like their website, and they have doc set generators. And like you can get advisory agreements, consulting agreements, like full Delaware incorporation, like full doc sets, and it like builds it for you. I was like blown away when I saw it. And that's not even that really AI, but I was just like, sure, they're using some. But no, I think you made a really good point. And I feel like especially in the class and the tier of consulting that you're doing, like they do not want you like, providing them an answer that they could have gotten themselves in ChatGPT. You know what I mean? So I fully appreciate that. Like I'm a huge proponent on like using it to summarize, using it to analyze. Like I'm no longer the treasurer for my neighborhood HOA. I've phased out as of like a couple of days ago, but like literally I would get like the bank or kind of expense detail. And instead of going through that line by line, I just upload it and say like, give me like, these categories of spend. Right. And it's just like, it's great for that. Right. Or like, hey, I've got 2 Excel lists and I need you to do some like kind of parsing and find errors and discrepancies and things. Like, anyway, what were you going to say? Sorry.
No, I was perfectly agreeing with you. Like for stuff like that, we absolutely do utilize AI tools and some similar to the ones that you just described. So some of our consultants and other folks I know for error checking and just like basically where they're directing it. So you want AI performing tasks for you that are overtly directed by you, not providing you with like primary information or that then you present as the expert on. That's the difference for me. Yeah. But I would say on AI more broadly, make sure it's solving a problem like with anything else in technologies. It's just, I think that we get very excited about the potential, rightfully so, but just AI as itself, the amount of times it's thrown around as a buzzword with no substance, substance is a point of glance for me in healthcare particularly. And if I like big data lakes, AI,
lakes,
the things that people throw around with no real substance to the problem that they're trying to address. So for any innovators out there too that are indexing heavy on AI platforms and pitching that to organizations, like everyone in the room can nod their heads because it's the hot topic of the day, but you really have to understand what problems it actually is solving for them.
I agree. And like, honestly, so we built like a free development roadmap tool, which quick plug, if you haven't gone and used it, you got to. The people that are using it are freaking out because the responses are so good. We have a free development roadmap that takes in a couple inputs, and there's like some magic, some prompt engineering and like sequencing and all this stuff. But we're just using a large language model, and like calling it AI, it's like, well, it's AI, but it's like, it's just a large language model, right? And I do think there's so many people that are building fancy wrappers around other people's large language models and then calling them like the next best thing since sliced bread. It's like, dude, you built like a bubble web front end on the top of a large language model and like 7 prompts. Like, you're not, Steve Jobs here. And I feel like the cost to replicate is like nothing, right? Like, I feel like the cost to replicate's low, and the speed that you can replicate and copy someone is also like short. I feel like, someone pitched me, I was out at JP Morgan. I'm not going to like go into detail on the idea because the gentleman was really nice, but he was like, yeah, we've got this thing and it does this thing and it works with insurance companies. And he was like ready to risk it all. Like, and he was like, yeah, we're out here, momentum. And I was like, how old is the company? He was like, less than a year. Like, I was like, oh, how many? He's like, we have 8 customers or something like that, or maybe it's more, I don't know. Point being, like, we were sharing an Uber, and if he's listening, I'm going to feel horrible, but I just didn't think there was anything fundamentally protectable about it. And in some situations that might not matter, right? Because you're partnering with a big insurance company or something. It's like the cost for them to do it would be way more. And then like, there's value in them just investing in someone that can do it for other people because like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's them just doing it for themselves generates them no revenue. It's an expense. If that company they invested in does it for other people. Anyways, I'm getting down a rabbit hole here, but I think like the protectability element and the cost to replicate piece are super, super low. Like, I like saying LLMs more than AI because ultimately that's kind of what everyone's talking about there.
Agreed. And I think it has power in healthcare though. So some like really great use cases would be like decision support. So if you could, grab a pretty large data set with identifiable patterns by clinicians, I think that if you could identify patterns within folks, so just like pattern recognition in a large language model with decision support on patient care, that has huge promise. AI assist, surgical assist would also be pretty interesting. And voice control in ORs, I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to get to like the last topic like we had lined out, but I want to get your thoughts on this really quick. So, I really think that traditional medtech, which is kind of in a slump right now, is kind of poised to be at the forefront of a lot of the actual integration of AI and large language models into healthcare, because like your digital health stuff and digital solutions, it's like, that's great. But like, whether it's a pill or a scalpel, like we got to touch the patient, we got to touch the pathology, radiation, you got to do it. So as that stuff gets integrated, it kind of breaks the mold or breaks like the current regime on like design controls and design freezing something when you have an AI that's constantly learning and then like modifying code to update. And like, you see what I'm saying? So it's like, how do you think we square that circle? Like, how do you think that stuff ends up getting regulated and like quality checked? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, decision-making processes on new products and services, and like the checks and balances AI would have against that, or what?
Yeah, like how do you come in and like quality audit a large language model that's changed 50 times in the past month? You know what I mean? It's like, do we just fire and you're relying on AI to check AI? It's like, it's kind of beyond our control at that point almost. Like, it's hard to get our arms around it.
That's why I do think some of those large language models, it's garbage out, right? Someone has to instruct the language model about what to look at, right? So if you are, for example, using AI to help you spot read mammograms for you and spot tumors, right? That's a common development where folks they're looking at thousands and thousands of images. Someone has to tell the model or train the model what to look at. So I think that the squaring that circle is doing the initial review of the design that informs what sent the model off and running.
Verification, validation, and human in the loop.
Yeah, so it's human component here is still in healthcare, at least from clinical decision support making, is the starting point, is the auditable thing. So I would hope that is what would scare me is if you just had a non-clinician writing a language model, then predicted how likely you are to have breast cancer and just scaring the hell out of people. Like that can't be the way that it evolves. And human in the loop for AI is more important to me in healthcare than a lot of.
I totally agree. So last question, do's and don'ts for seeking an investment with an established industry partner or like a large health system. Like what would you recommend for MedTech innovators?
Oh, yeah. Again, just not to be too repetitive from stuff we've already talked about, but frame the problem in a way that will resonate with. That's the number one piece of advice. So it goes back to what we were describing on your friend who's trying to position it as the problem with the bags, not the cost of the bags. So frame it in something that don't make it hyperbolistic, like say that you're going to save them millions of dollars by implementing the simple solution. So keep it simplistic, realistic, and relatable, right? So I just say focus on those three core tenets, and then also accept they're not going to move at the same pace as you, but be resilient, right? Those, like the individual you're working with may think it's a great idea and may want to see it happen, and they are fighting for you, but it's not going to feel like it all the time. So just keep to those three core tenets and be patient and don't give up and be resilient.
Yeah, don't take it personal, be resilient, be patient. Those are words to live by. Stewart, I know you have a heart out. I can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time. This was an incredible conversation. We got to do round two. We're going to have to do it because there's a lot of stuff we didn't get to. But dude, thank you for being on the pod. Everyone that joined, thanks for listening in.
Thanks for having me, and it's great to be with you, and happy to be back anytime.